I don't know where I should set up to film. Is that a good background? Sure, why not? I just filmed like the entire intro and I didn't hit record. It's okay. I saw this gouache set and it's called like a jelly gouache set. And it became pretty viral on TikTok, but I don't really use TikTok. A couple artists that I watch on YouTube were doing like TikTok trends and testing them out and making videos on it. And so I saw these jelly gouaches over and over, and I just kind of disregarded them and was like, that's probably not all it's hyped up to be, because normally things aren't. And then I kept getting video suggestions of reviews. Okay. I kept getting suggested review videos of the product itself, so I watched a couple of them, and they were actually getting pretty good reviews from people that use gouache as their main medium, which I don't use gouache as my main medium, but I do enjoy painting in it when I do paint because it's the easiest for me compared to acrylic and watercolor. I watched a couple more videos, and the main thing that made me want to... Are we just gonna keep doing this? Are we just gonna keep doing this? She hates being touched, but she'll climb all over you. But the second you touch her, she's like, mm-mm. Regular gouache that comes in tubes doesn't re-wet when it dries out the same as watercolor does. So I'm someone who squirts out too much paint out of the tube when I'm mixing it on my palette. And then I end up not using all of the paint, and it ends up being washed down the drain. What happens with watercolor is you can re-wet it and use it almost the exact same as you could when it came out of the tube. So what I do with my watercolors that are in tubes is I squirt them out into palettes and let them dry, and then I just use that palette and re-wet it. You can't do that with gouache. You can't get the same opacity. You can re-wet it and use it almost like watercolor. It's the most effective when you use it straight out of the tube, but then I end up wasting product and washing a lot of it off my palette that I didn't use. The idea of these jelly gouaches that are already in a palette that is in like an almost resealable container and it stays pretty wet really intrigued me. And when I looked them up on Amazon, they were only, I think, $20 to $25. So I was like, it's worth the $20 just to try them out. And if they don't work, then I don't know, it's better than, like, I expected them to be more in the $50 price range for the reviews that they were getting and the amount of product you get, because you get 30 milliliters of each color. And I think normal tubes of gouache are 15 or 16 milliliters. So you get almost double the product for about half the price of at least the quality of gouache that I use. So I was like, heck yeah, I'm gonna try it out. Why not? So I ordered it. We're in quarantine. I was like, it gives me something to do. Yeah, it does come in a resealable container, which is really nice. The colors come in these little almost like sauce packets like you would get at Chick-fil-A or somewhere, and you peel off the top and expose the paint. And a lot of people were complaining that the seals on the tops are really hard to get off. I had no problem with it at all. I had no problem with them not coming off in one piece or getting stuck. I did not experience that with my set, but I've seen it, almost every other video I watched said that they had that problem. So maybe I got lucky. I don't know, but that is something to watch out for if you're thinking about getting them and it would bother you. So going in, already perks were it will reduce like wasting of the product, I guess, and using too much on my palette. You got 30 milliliters of product anyway, so even if you do end up wasting a little bit of it, you get so much for the price point that's great. The color selection is really good. It comes with its own little palette for you to mix on. Yeah, it's just like a fun, different, and interesting product. So those were my thoughts going in. To start off with, I was doing time lapses of me painting in it. A couple of them are slightly out of frame. The first thing I did to kind of get used to the texture of the paint and how it performed on my paper was I watered it down a lot and almost used it like watercolor. And as y'all know, I'm sure, I have been painting clouds a whole lot. So I did 2 cloud paintings. It was super, super watered down almost to where it was watercolor pigment, just to see how it behaved like watercolor, because most gouache you can water down and use like watercolor. So I wanted to see how this worked compared to the gouache I already have and the watercolor I already have, and it did great. It layered really nicely. I did just a solid wash of color first. This one I did like a light blue, and this one I did super, super, super pale pink. You can barely even tell what the wash is. This one I layered these clouds and then, you know, dropped darker pigments on to see how it would spread out, and I think it did. I think it did very well. The colors dried pretty pigmented. If you're familiar with gouache, you know when the color is wet, it's more pigmented and the color is more saturated, and then as it dries, it loses a little bit of its saturation and can sometimes get a little bit chalky. It did not happen with these because these are pretty, like, the more you dilute it, the less that happens. So I'm really happy with how this one turned out. This one, I really like this guy. I just did some pink and gray, and same thing, just layered the colors on top of each other. They layered very well. You can see a little bit of chalkiness in some of the gray, but not too bad. I would say it's about equivalent of what my other gouache sets that I have do. Like all of them dry a little bit chalky and a little bit desaturated, but nothing that normal gouache doesn't do. And then I did this one in the same watered down watercolor effect. It's a little bit thicker paint, and like these areas where it's darker are a little bit thicker, but I wanted to see what kind of lines I could get and do this dark blue to orange. I know my colors, I swear. Do this dark blue to orange transition and see how I can get it to behave. And again, it was just like any other gouache that I've used out of a tube. It layered very well. These lighter orange colors layered on top of the darker orange well, same up here. These colors layered on top of this blue well. So overall, I was very happy with how this turned out. So then the next three that I did, I used a thicker gouache mixture. I didn't add as much water to my paint just to see how the opacity was and if I could get a solid layer of color put down, because a lot of times, you know, you try to put a solid layer of color down and it will sometimes have streaks in it and it won't be a solid wash. But I just wanted to see how it performed when it was a little bit thicker and see if it got chalky and things like that. This is also a completely different subject matter than I normally paint. Normally I like loose and organic shapes, like the clouds that I can, like, if I mess up a little bit, it's okay. This is the first one I did. And I just did this solid wash, this nice gradient. I really liked how it performed here. And then we have a nice little ocean right here. And then I did these just pink buildings, and I was able to get a very solid wash of color with no inconsistencies or where you can see the layers or the brush strokes. And, you know, I even in some places went over it to get this straight line again. But you can't really tell. It looks like almost how acrylic paint would be. So yeah, I'm really happy with how it performed. I'm not 100% happy with how this painting itself came out, just execution wise for me. But like I said, this is my first time even trying to make gouache go in a straight line like that and be very cookie cutter and crisp. I'm happy with how it performed here. Again, just like I would say almost better than my average gouache that I use performs when it comes to layering, because the gouache that I use isn't always the best at layering, and it'll sometimes get a really weird texture if you layer thick on top of thick. But this one, it did not. It didn't get chalky, and the colors kept their saturation and all of their vibrant colors. And then I did this one. I am in love with this so much. Like, I absolutely love how this turned out. I was able to get all of the crisp lines and layer all of this. You might see some streaks in the first layer, but on the second layer, everything was almost uniform in color. I was able to get all of these crisp lines, and I love how it came out. That's all I have to say. The colors are great. It's not chalky. It's not streaky. It's exactly what I wanted it to be. So this is the last one I did. So I did the orange first and then taped off with some washi tape, and then did this gray blue to a little bit deeper of a blue gradient on top, and then peeled my tape off and did a nice little plant. Again, I love how this performed. It was opaque enough to cover my already orange, because like when I did the orange, I literally just like did brush strokes of orange, so the orange kind of bled out over here. But once I put my tape down and I did 2 layers of this paint, it completely covered up all of the orange underneath. And again, I was able to layer this plant completely on top of it, and I had no problems there. And it's not chalky. You can really tell because this is a darker color and I did it so thick. The fact that it's not chalky is pretty much like all you need to see when it comes to like chalkiness and saturation of this. So I really like how this turned out too. Overall, 10 out of 10 recommend. If you are someone like me who always puts more product on your palette than you're going to use when mixing colors and things, and you don't want to waste your gouache, I would highly recommend getting these. It's so nice. And the gouache palette is almost like a Tupperware where you put the lid on and it has this little like thing that it fits into. This doesn't make any sense. And then you snap it shut like Tupperware containers for food and stuff. The only time the paint really starts to dry out is if you're painting for a long period of time, because I had the lid off of the palette for about 4 hours, I want to say, and it did start to get a little bit of a film on top of each color. But what I did was I just put a couple drops of water in each color pan and then put the lid on, so it does have a little bit of moisture in there. It won't start to dry out. I have no complaints on it. I'm not an expert in gouache. I just started painting in gouache about 6 months ago, but I do really like the medium. I'm excited to make more paintings with this palette. If you're interested in any of these, they are up on my website, marrisgulledge.com, and they're under non-car originals, because most of the stuff on my website is car stuff. But yes, I put all of these up. If you're interested in any of those or any other paintings that I do have lots of really cool watercolor clouds and nebulas and all kinds of cool stuff. So if you're interested in any of that, the link to the website will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching. And again, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment of some video ideas you want to see in the future. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.